All right, so have you ever seen one of those ads that pops up and it's like, make $1 million in 4 months?
Oh, yeah, those are everywhere.
Yeah, you're like, come on, really? But they always sound so convincing.
It's like they know exactly what buttons to push, you know?
They do, they do. So that's kind of what we're looking at today.
Okay.
This is, it's called the Yellow Brick Formula, and the guy behind it, Sean Donahoe, claims he can help you make like $1.2 million, I think it was, in just under 4 months.
Wow, that's a bold claim.
Yeah, and it's like he hits all the right notes, 23 years of experience. He says he has a really simple system. All you got to do is put in like an hour a day.
Mm.
So very tempting, right?
It sounds almost too good to be true, though.
Exactly. And that's why we're doing a deep dive into this. We're going to see what's really going on here.
Love it.
So, first things first, like, who is this Sean Donahoe guy? The ad talks about all this experience he has, but does that really mean anything? Like, what does 23 years in trading actually tell us?
Right. Well, I mean, it definitely tells us he's been around the block a few times, right?
Oh,
It's not like he just started yesterday.
sure.
But just because you've been doing something for a long time doesn't automatically make you good at it, right? It's kind of like saying someone's been driving for 23 years.
Right.
They could be an amazing driver. Maybe they're a professional race car driver.
They
Or
could just, not be very good.
Exactly. They could have had a ton of accidents. Who knows?
Yeah, that's a good point. So when it comes to financial advice, especially something like this, you really got to dig deeper.
Yep.
You want to look past just the number of years and actually see some results.
So, like, what should we be looking for?
Well, I think the most important thing is track record.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what kind of returns has he actually made? And not just over his entire career, but consistently, year after year.
Right. Because you could have one good year and then just,
Exactly. And you always want to compare it to something like a benchmark, like the S&P 500, for example. So, is he actually beating the market, or is he just kind of riding the wave?
Right. And if he's not consistently outperforming the market, then what's so special about his system,
Yeah, that makes sense. And speaking of things that need a closer look, let's talk about that $1.2 million figure.
Oh, yeah, that big shiny number.
It's like plastered all over the ad, but is it real? Like, what are we actually looking at here?
It's a good question because a lot of times these ads, they throw out these big numbers,
Right.
but they don't always tell you the whole story.
It's very misleading.
Exactly. So first of all, we need to know, is this $1.2 million revenue or profit?
Oh, that's a big difference.
Huge difference. Revenue is just the total amount of money that's coming in.
Right.
Profit is what's left after you've paid all your expenses, all your costs.
Oh, so it's like, imagine if you had a lemonade stand, right?
Yeah?
And you sold $100 worth of lemonade.
Okay, that's your revenue.
That's revenue, but then you had to buy all the lemons and the sugar and the cups and everything.
Right, and maybe you had to pay someone to help you.
Right, exactly.
So all those costs, that all comes out of your revenue.
So you might only end up with like $20 profit.
Exactly. And with trading, those costs, those expenses can be pretty significant.
Like what kind of things?
Well, you've got trading fees. Every time you buy or sell something, there's taxes on any profits you make.
Right.
And of course, there's always the risk of losses.
Yeah, you could lose money.
Absolutely. And those losses eat into your profits, too.
So it's not as simple as just seeing a big number and thinking, oh, I'm going to make that much.
Nope. You got to look at the whole picture.
Okay, and this ad makes another kind of weird claim. It says, no products, sales, or marketing.
That is interesting.
And it kind of makes me scratch my head because, like, how does a business even work without those things?
Right. It's a bit of a head scratcher.
Yeah, it is.
Like, how are they making money if they're not selling anything?
Yeah, exactly.
So one possibility is that maybe he's mainly focused on sharing his trading strategies,
Like what, like a subscription service or something?
Yeah, maybe it's like a subscription service where you get access to his trades. Or maybe it's some kind of mentorship program where he works with you one-on-one. Or, another possibility is that it's an educational course.
Okay, yeah, like teaching people how to trade.
Right. But the problem is the ad is so vague, we just don't know for sure.
Yeah, that's really unclear.
And that lack of transparency, that's a bit of a red flag for me.
Why is that?
Well, it's like if someone invites you to a party, but they don't tell you where it is or what to wear.
Right.
You could show up at the wrong place, dressed totally inappropriately.
Yeah, you'd feel pretty silly.
Exactly. So with an investment opportunity like this, you want to know exactly what you're getting into before you hand over any money.
Okay, that makes sense. So we've seen a pattern here. Big promises, not a lot of details.
Yeah, it's a bit of a theme.
And then there's that 60-minute-a-day commitment, which on the one hand sounds pretty appealing, you know? It's like, oh, I could just squeeze that into my busy day.
Right. It sounds very manageable.
But on the other hand, it kind of makes me wonder, is that really enough time to become a successful trader? I mean, it's not like learning to, I don't know, bake cookies or something.
No, it's definitely more complex than that.
Yeah, like how much can you really learn and do in just an hour?
It's tempting to think that we can just fit these complex things into our lives, just like an hour here or there.
Right.
But think about it this way, like, would you expect to become fluent in a foreign language if you only studied for an hour a day?
Probably not.
Or, imagine trying to master a musical instrument with just an hour of practice a day.
Yeah, it would take you forever.
Exactly. And trading, it's a skill. It takes time to develop. You got to learn the fundamentals. You got to stay up to date on what's happening in the markets. And then you have to be able to make quick, informed decisions.
So it's not something you can just do half-heartedly?
Right. It requires focus. It requires dedication. And it requires time.
Okay, so even if I could find an hour in my day, I should be realistic about what I can achieve in that time frame.
Absolutely. And don't underestimate the importance of ongoing learning.
Right. The markets are always changing.
Exactly. So you always got to be learning, always got to be adapting.
And finally, let's talk about that call to action, the get on the waiting list thing.
Oh, yeah. Classic marketing tactic.
It totally feels like they're trying to create this sense of scarcity. Like, oh, there are only a few spots left. You better hurry.
Absolutely. It's FOMO, fear of missing out.
Yeah.
And it works really well because people are naturally drawn to things that seem exclusive or limited.
Right. Like we don't want to miss out on something good.
Exactly. So whenever you see something like that, get on the waiting list, limited spots available, always ask yourself, what's the real purpose of this waiting list?
Yeah. Is it really limited or are they just trying to collect my email address?
Right. And sometimes those waiting lists are just a way to generate hype and build anticipation.
It's all marketing. So, okay, we've covered a lot of ground here. What are some of the key takeaways for our listeners?
Okay, so big picture. The yellow brick formula makes some pretty big promises.
Yeah, like life-changing promises.
Exactly, but as we've seen, there are some red flags too.
Definitely some things to watch out for.
So before you rush to get on that waiting list, remember, due diligence is crucial.
What does that mean exactly?
It means doing your homework.
Okay.
Don't just take their word for it. Look for concrete evidence.
Like what kind of evidence?
Well, for starters, research Sean Donahoe's track record independently. Go beyond the ad. See if you can find any verified information about his past performance.
Yeah, like from a reputable source.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to ask for specifics about the program, like what exactly will you be learning? What kind of support will you receive? And most importantly, think about whether that time commitment is realistic for you.
Yeah, an hour a day sounds nice in theory, but can you actually make it work?
Right. You got to be honest with yourself.
And ultimately, don't let the allure of a shortcut cloud your judgment.
There are no shortcuts to success, especially in trading.
And I know some people listening might be thinking, okay, maybe this specific program isn't the answer, but I'm still interested in learning more about trading. Where's a good place for them to start?
That's great. There are so many resources available for people who want to learn about trading responsibly.
Yeah, where should they look?
Well, a good place to start is with educational courses. There are a lot of reputable institutions that offer online courses.
Like universities and stuff?
Yeah, and there are also organizations specifically dedicated to financial education.
Okay, so do your research. Make sure it's a legitimate source.
Right. And another great resource is books. There are tons of books written by respected financial experts.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of those at the bookstore.
And then, of course, there are a lot of websites and online communities dedicated to trading and investing. But again, always be careful, do your research, make sure the information is coming from a reliable source.
So always double check. Don't just believe everything you read on the internet.
Exactly.
Great advice. Thanks so much for joining me today. This has been really helpful.
My pleasure. Anytime.
And for our listeners, remember, the desire to achieve financial freedom is a great goal, but it's important to approach it with a healthy dose of skepticism and a commitment to learning and doing things the right way.
Absolutely. There's no substitute for knowledge and hard work.
And that's it for today's deep dive. We'll see you next time.
See ya.